When my boy Liam told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas at his place, a strange, cold calm settled over me. I just nodded, pulled on my coat, and stepped out into the crisp December air. By the time the calendar flipped to a new year, their mortgage was a thing of the past. At least the payments they were making on it were. And believe me, that was only the tip of the iceberg. Some folks need a hard lesson in humility, and you wouldn't believe what came next. But before I dive into the rest of it, do me a favor, eh? Hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're tuning in from. Now, where was I? Oh, right. I could still whip up my famous turkey this year, I offered, leaning back into Liam's plush leather couch, the one his wife Chloe picked out. The one with that sage, stuffing your mom used to rave about. Said it was even better than her own grandma's, remember? The words hung there, thick with unspoken history, mingling with the overly sweet scent of Chloe's fancy soy candles. Liam shifted beside me on the couch, his wedding band glinting in the light from their massive 12-foot balsam fur, which practically scraped the ceiling. I saw his shoulders tense, pull inward, like he was getting ready for a punch. "Dad," he started, his voice barely a whisper, "look, you won't be welcome here for Christmas this year." The air went out of the room. I just stared, convinced my ears were playing tricks on me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice flat. "Why wouldn't I be welcome?" Liam couldn't meet my gaze, his eyes glued to the sleek marble coffee table, the one I'd helped him haul home last spring when Chloe declared their old one just wasn't chic enough. "Chloe's folks are coming," he mumbled, "and they'd prefer it if you weren't around." My hands went cold, clammy. "They'd prefer." I repeated the words, tasting like ash. "It's just easier this way, Dad." He stammered, his voice practically disappearing. "You know how Chloe's family is with their traditions. They've got their own way of doing things." He looked like he was shrinking right there on the couch, trying to vanish into the cushions. My eyes swept around that living room, the heavy silk drapes that hung so perfectly. My money after Chloe decided their old ones didn't offer enough privacy. The gleaming hardwood floors paid for with a chunk of my second mortgage, the intricate crown molding framing the ceiling that took every last dollar on my credit card. Every damn square foot of this place screamed my name. My sweat, my savings, my love, poured into these walls for my boy. "Their own way," I echoed, letting the words hang heavy. "And what exactly is that way, Liam?" He flinched, pulling back further. "Dad, please, don't make this more difficult than it already is." Through the wide archway into the kitchen, I could see it. Chloe's brand new, professional-grade KitchenAid mixer, the one she absolutely needed for her so-called holiday baking phase, which by my count lasted about 3 weeks last year. $2,000 of my money sitting there on the counter, probably used twice since Halloween. So where exactly am I supposed to spend Christmas then? The question slipped out softer than I'd meant it to be. Liam's face crumpled, a messy mix of shame and discomfort. "Maybe you could, I don't know, maybe visit Aunt Lorraine," he offered, stumbling over the words. "Or we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another dental appointment that could be rescheduled at their leisure. I pushed myself up from the couch, my knees groaning a protest that echoed the burden I'd been carrying alone for what felt like a lifetime. "I see," I managed. "Dad, wait." Liam called out, but I was already moving, walking past the hallway gallery of family photos, where my own face seemed to shrink, fading a little more in each polished frame. I passed the overflowing coat closet, stuffed with Chloe's endless collection of designer jackets. My hand closed around the cold, solid brass of the doorknob. Without turning back, I said, "Liam, you tell Chloe's parents. Feliz Navidad." I finished the words hanging in the suddenly heavy air. The blast of December wind hit my face like a physical blow as I stepped out onto the porch and headed for my old pickup truck. Behind me, I heard Liam call my name just once, then the quiet, definitive click of the door. Final. Absolute. I slumped into the driver's seat, engine off, and just sat there for a long moment, watching the cheerful, twinkling Christmas lights glow in the windows of every house on the street. Houses I now knew I'd never be truly welcome in. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Liam already trying to smooth things over with a string of empty promises and a dollop of guilt. I let it ring. Instead of answering, I twisted the key in the ignition, and the old truck rumbled to life. I pulled out into the inky darkness, leaving behind the deceptively warm glow of a house I'd practically built, but where I'd never truly belonged. The heater kicked in a weak hum against the biting December cold as I steered through the quiet, familiar streets towards my own place. Every corner of this neighborhood, every frost-covered lawn held ghosts of the man I used to be. The one who swore family was everything, who'd empty his pockets just to see his son crack a smile. That man, I realized, was a damn fool. I hit the next red light on the way home, watching a young father load Christmas presents into his SUV. His kids pressed their faces against the window breath, fogging the glass with pure, unadulterated excitement. Once upon a time, that had been Liam and me. Before Chloe, before I became nothing more than a walking ATM, with inconvenient emotions, and the numbers started rolling through my head like a broken slot machine. $2,800 every month for 5 years. My calculator had given up trying to make sense of it last spring, when I'd finally added up the total. $140,000. More money than Maria and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just gone. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary as the light turned green. The truck responded with a growl that perfectly matched my mood. The next turn brought me past the branch, where I'd refinanced my house. Our house, Maria's and mine, to cover their down payment. The loan officer had looked at me with a pity I hadn't recognized at the time. "Mr. McGregor," he'd said, "are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment. Not my son's future, not my family's security. Someone else's investment. And then there was the bank where I had taken out a second mortgage when Liam lost his job 2 years ago. Just temporary, Dad, he'd promised. Just until I get back on my feet. Chloe had stood behind him, her $700 designer purse slung over her shoulder, nodding sympathetically while I swear I could see her mentally calculating how much my desperation was worth. Nothing. As it turned out, my desperation was worth absolutely nothing to them. I pulled into my own driveway, the one with the cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix, because every spare dollar disappeared into their perfect suburban fantasy. The porch light flickered another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow, without Maria's laughter, without the warmth of family gatherings that would never happen again. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys, the shrill tone echoing off the empty walls. Chloe's name flashed on the screen, probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for her parents' delicate sensibilities. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. I answered on the 4th ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I'd pick up at all. "Dennis." Chloe's voice dripped with that false sweetness The same tone she used when asking me to cover their water bill or property taxes. I heard about the little misunderstanding with Liam. Misunderstanding. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my coat. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Chloe. You made your position quite clear. Look, I know this seems harsh. She started, her voice already losing some of its fake sincerity. But you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere. I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. And what atmosphere is that? A pause. I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background, probably spending money that should have gone to their mortgage payment. Money that was my responsibility, apparently. Well, they're not used to your kind of conversation, Dad. All that talk about fixing trucks and you know the way things used to be in the neighborhood. And frankly, Dennis, they're very well-traveled people. They expect discussions about international affairs, obscure art, high literature, you know. The words hit harder than a physical blow. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing insults, for Liam's sake, of pretending not to notice the way she looked at me, like I was some kind of hired help. My kind of conversation. My voice stayed level-controlled. You mean the stories you hung on every word of for 3 years when money was tight? The ones you said reminded you of growing up in our old community? That was different. She snapped, the false sweetness completely evaporated. We were appreciative then, but now with my parents. Now with your parents you can't have the rough-around-the-edges, blue-collar type embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table. Don't be dramatic, Dennis, she hissed. This isn't about heritage, it's about class. My old man went to McGill, top of his class. My mom speaks 3 languages, one of them French, eh? And they've got a cottage up in Muskoka, real fancy spot. What exactly would you even chat about at the dinner table? Your adventures with drywall and plumbing. Heat flooded my chest, but my voice stayed steady. I started my own business from scratch. Chloe, right after Liam's granddad passed, put a roof over the heads of 40 good folks. Paid more in taxes than your entire family ever saw in a lifetime. Money's one thing, Dennis, but a person's upbringing, their schooling, that's what really counts. And honestly, Maria, bless her heart, she knew where she stood, eh? Better than you seemed to. That was it. She'd gone too far. A line I never even knew was there until she'd tap-danced right over it in her fancy Italian boots. What in the blazes did you just say about my Maria? I'm just saying, she had a way of fitting in, eh? Never caused a fuss. Knew that some places just weren't her scene. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. Maria had more class in her pinky finger than your whole family tree combined. Oh, please. She cleaned houses for a living. Got lucky. At least she knew to keep it on the down low, eh, Dennis? My voice, it was barely a growl, but it sent shivers down my own spine. You listen to me, Chloe, and you listen good. This talk, it's done. We're done pretending. Done with this whole charade of family. She started to interrupt. You can't just. We're done. I cut her off, my thumb already on the end call button. Click. Silence. I placed the phone gently on the counter, my hand surprisingly steady. The kitchen, usually so quiet, felt lighter, as if all the pent-up tension had just evaporated into the thin December air. I moved to my small desk in the corner, the one where I paid my own modest bills, pulled out that old beat-up file folder I'd been avoiding for what felt like an eternity. Bank statements, mortgage documents, 5 years of automatic transfers that had slowly, surely drained me dry, all while they lived it up big city style. Time to cut the cord. This was it, the first step. canceling that darn mortgage payment. The papers lay scattered across my worn kitchen table, a grim ledger of my own misguided generosity. 5 years of bank statements, page after page, each one staring back at me with that same damning entry. $2,800 cleared on the 15th of every single month, vanishing from my bank account like smoke from a campfire, only to reappear in theirs. A paper trail of pure, unadulterated foolishness. I grabbed my old calculator, the one with the sticky buttons, and started punching in numbers. Year 1, 33,600. Year 2, another 33,600. By year 3, I'd stopped replacing my own worn-out flannel shirts. Year 4, I was hitting up the bargain bins at the grocery store, always looking for those weekly specials. And this year, the 5th year, it was peanut butter sandwiches for lunch almost every day, just to keep the lights on and their champagne flowing. $143,400. And that didn't even count the down payment. Didn't count all those times I'd had to bail them out for the hydro bill or the internet when Chloe's little shopping sprees went sideways. Didn't count the new roof I paid for the fancy landscaping they just had to have, or all the furniture that was essential for their high society life. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the figures until they swam before my eyes. Maria's life insurance, my own retirement nest egg, even the modest college fund we'd started for grandkids I'd apparently never get to bounce on my knee. All of it. Gone. Poured into a place where I wasn't even good enough to share a Christmas turkey. I reached for my phone, fumbling for a second, then scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my bank. My local credit union, mind you, not some big corporate outfit. The automated voice offered choices. English, French. Oh, how thoughtful. So inclusive for a regular Canadian fella like me. Customer service, a cheerful voice chirped. This is Jennifer. How can I help you today, eh? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice surprising me with its steely calm. It was probably the steadiest it had been in years. Certainly, sir, she replied, her tone unwavering. I'll just need your account number and a bit of verification. I rattled off the numbers, hearing the gentle click of her keyboard in the background. She was professional, efficient, no hint of judgment in her voice about a 62-year-old man suddenly pulling the plug on what was obviously his kid's mortgage. Ah, yes, Mr. McIntyre, she said. I see the transfer you're referring to. $2,800 monthly to a Scotia bank account ending in 7423. Is that the one? And how long have you been making this particular transfer, sir? 5 years. The words left a bitter taste on my tongue. And you wish to cancel it effective immediately. I looked around my own kitchen at the dated appliances I'd been meaning to replace for years but couldn't afford to, at the worn linoleum on the walls that desperately needed a fresh coat of paint, at the drafty windows that leaked the biting December air, all because I'd poured my own home improvement cash into their fancy West Coast manor, eh? Someone else's castle, indeed. Effective immediately. I confirmed the words, feeling like a crisp breath of fresh air. Done. The transfer has been cancelled. Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. McIntyre? Jennifer asked. No. I said, the word a sweet symphony in my ears. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat there, letting the sudden profound quiet of my house wash over me. Outside, the deep December darkness was already settling over our little corner of Ontario. Through my front window, I could see the neighbors' Christmas lights, twinkling a warm glow from houses where families gathered without conditions, without judgment, without the need to hide who they truly were. For the first time in 5 years, my own budget for next month would actually balance. For the first time since Maria passed, I could afford to finally fix that flickering porch light, buy some proper Canadian bacon and decent groceries, maybe even think about a little trip out to the Rockies, or even the Maritimes, eh? I slowly gathered up the mountain of bank statements, the mortgage papers, every last bit of evidence of my misguided generosity. Then I walked over to the old fieldstone fireplace, struck a wooden match, and watched 5 years of silent martyrdom curl into ash. The flames licked at the paper, and the heat felt good on my face, warmer somehow than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text message. Probably Liam trying to apologize with some half-baked excuse, or Chloe needing cash for something essential, like a new set of artisanal throw pillows for her hygge aesthetic. I didn't even glance at it. Instead, I went to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a generous measure of the good Canadian rye, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive. Tonight, though, tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Maria's faded photo on the mantelpiece, to the man I used to be, and the man I was finally becoming. "Merry Christmas to me," I murmured, and for the first time in a long, long while, I truly meant it. The next morning the air was crisp and clear, December sunlight pouring through my kitchen windows as I slowly nursed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't doing mental gymnastics, calculating exactly how much cash would vanish from my account in 3 days' time. The taste of freedom, let me tell you, was sweeter than any fancy artisan roast I'd ever bought. That freedom, it tasted better than the fancy Colombian blend I'd finally allowed myself to splurge on. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Chloe's name flashed on the screen, glaring at me like a warning label. "Dennis." Her voice, already tinged with that familiar, barely concealed impatience, cut through the quiet. "I need you to pick up my parents from the airport. Their flight from Seattle arrives at 2:30. I set my Tim Hortons mug down, carefully watching the steam curl lazily towards the ceiling. "Chloe," I said, my voice flat, "did you by chance forget about our little chat yesterday? Look, Dennis, whatever that was about." She brushed me off. "We need to focus on practical matters now. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one I know with time on their hands during the day." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't fit to share a Christmas turkey with her family, she expected me to act as their personal chauffeur. "And you're asking me because—" I prompted. "Because that's what family does, Dennis." She snapped, her voice sharpening with irritation. "They help each other, eh? Besides, let's be honest here. You're not my rival. You're you're just too weak to be my rival. So just get in your truck and pick them up." There it was, the final condescending insult, wrapped up neat and tidy in a command. "What airline?" I asked, my voice surprisingly quiet. "Air Canada Flight 447, she rattled off. "They'll be at baggage claim Carousel 3. And Dennis," she added, a sudden edge in her voice, "they're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us." I could hear the faint, annoying tap, tap, tap of her perfectly manicured nails against something hard. Probably her fancy granite countertop, the very one I'd paid for when she'd decided that perfectly good laminate just wasn't chic enough for her dinner parties. "Of course," I said, my voice dripping with an irony I knew she wouldn't catch. "I'll take care of everything." "Good. And wear something decent," she commanded. "Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Liam's graduation. My parents notice things like that." Then click. The line went dead. She hadn't even bothered with a thanks, eh? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the phone's now blank screen. 2:00 p.m. Air Canada Flight 447. Baggage claim carousel 3. I glanced at the wall clock hanging above my sink. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of that fine Colombian blend, after all I could afford it now. Added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened up yesterday's local paper to the crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would hit me eventually like ock to the face. This was it. Part 6. The good old airport trap, eh? By about 2:15 p.m., I was properly settled into my favorite armchair, a fresh mug of Earl Grey steaming beside me, and the Sunday edition of the Toronto Star spread open. Yesterday's crossword, delayed gratification, had been postponement, lay completed on my coffee table. Funny how that works out. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. Chloe's name. Again. I just let it ring. The December sun slanted through my living room windows, painting warm stripes across the rug. This space where I'd spent too many lonely evenings tallying up the cost of my generosity felt different today. The silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was earned. Intentional. About 2:47 p.m., the phone buzzed again. This time I caught the preview of her text. "Dad, where are you?" My parents are. I just flipped the thing face down and went back to the sports section. Looks like the Leafs had choked again. Some things never change. By 3:30 p.m., that phone had buzzed at least 6 times. I'd finished. The Star brewed a second pot of tea, proper steeped, none of that fancy stuff, and it even started tackling the dreaded junk drawer in my kitchen. Amazing what a fella can accomplish when he isn't scrambling around, acting like a personal bellhop for folks who wouldn't give you the time of day otherwise. The 7th call, around 3:45, was from an unknown number. Likely Roger or Beverly, Chloe's parents, begging to borrow some poor soul's cell at the airport, eh? I let that one ring, too. Outside, old man Henderson next door was stringing up his Christmas lights, his grandkids tearing around the front yard with that wild, sugar-fueled energy only a December afternoon can whip up. Just normal families doing normal things. The way it should be. No one not on my watch was stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who was never going to show up. By 4:15 p.m., my cell phone started ringing, and just wouldn't quit. Chloe, then that unknown number, then Chloe again. The buzzing was constant, like a whole nest of angry wasps buzzing trapped against a window. I walked right into my kitchen and with a satisfying thwack, pulled the cord on my landline right out of the wall, and then I flicked my cell phone completely off. Ah, perfect silence. The kind you can really feel. I padded over to the fridge and made myself a proper grilled cheese sandwich, extra cheddar, eh? And heated up a can of tomato soup. Real comfort food, the kind I hadn't let myself have in months. Every last grocery dollar had been stretched thin, just trying to make ends meet while subsidizing their champagne and caviar lifestyle. The cheese melted perfectly, golden and gooey, just the way I like it. The soup steamed gently in my favorite mug. Outside, the winter sun was already dipping below the horizon, painting long purple shadows across my backyard. And somewhere across town, 3 particular individuals were likely standing in a chilly airport parking garage, probably having a right old spat about taxi fare, wondering how their supposed personal servant had the sheer audacity to leave them high and dry. The thought, I gotta say, made my soup taste even better. Like a little slice of heaven, eh? By 5:00 p.m., I'd finished my dinner, loaded up the dishwasher. Felt good, that. And was just starting to ponder what movie might be on. It had been years, 8 years, since I'd had an entire evening to myself without some emergency call for money or a last-minute favor. I was just reaching for the remote, looking forward to a quiet night, when suddenly someone started pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock, mind you. This was a pounding, a furious, aggressive hammering that rattled the whole doorframe and screamed pure, unadulterated fury. I set down my tea, taking a slow, deliberate breath, and walked towards the racket. I already knew deep down exactly who'd be on the other side of that door. The pounding intensified as I got closer, each blow more violent, more desperate than the last. Peeking through the peephole, I saw 3 figures huddled on my small porch, practically pressed up against the glass like a pack of wolves that had finally cornered their dinner. I swung open the door to find Roger's face beet red and practically inches from mine. "What in the blazes is wrong with you, Dennis?" he bellowed, pushing right past me into my living room without so much as a "by your leave." "We waited at that damn airport for over 3 hours. Beverly followed him, her usually perfectly coiffed hair looking like she'd been through a wind tunnel, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line of pure venom. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, Dennis. For someone your age, absolutely barbaric." Chloe brought up the rear, her fancy designer coat all wrinkled, her makeup smeared like a raccoon's. "You humiliated us," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $40 taxi because you decided to, just get out of my house." My voice, when I finally spoke, cut through their chorus of rage like a sharp blade through fine silk. They stopped mid-rant, shocked into silence by the sudden steel in my tone. "Excuse me." Roger's face went from beet red to a mottled purple. "You don't get to call the shots here, buddy. Not after that stunt you pulled today. This is my house," I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door. "And I want you out. Now." Beverly stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over decades of looking down her nose at folks like me. "Dennis, you clearly don't understand the magnitude of your mistake. My husband has connections throughout this city. Bay Street connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect—" "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "A lesson about your excessive arrogance and your poor treatment of people you consider beneath you." Chloe's mouth fell open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service," I countered, stepping aside and holding the door open wider. "The lesson is over. You can leave." Roger jabbed a finger toward my chest, but didn't quite dare make contact. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. I've been a pillar in this community longer than you've been out of diapers. I know people, important people. People who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. McPherson?" My voice remained flat. "It's a promise." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You think abandoning respectable folks at Pearson Airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are, eh?" Beverly nodded her smile, sharp enough to cut through ice. "Indeed. Actions have consequences. Dennis, and yours will be quite public." Chloe grabbed her father's arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old man isn't worth our time." They filed out of my house like a defeated army, but Roger turned back at the threshold. "You'll regret this," he said. "I guarantee it." I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying thwack. Through the window I watched them pile into their rental car, still arguing amongst themselves as they drove away into the deep December darkness. The house felt cleaner with them gone, as if their presence had left a greasy stain that was only now lifting. But their parting words echoed in the sudden quiet. Public consequences, important people connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my Earl Grey, still warm in its mug. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt something that might have been concern, but it was overwhelmed by something much stronger. Anticipation. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and scanning the Toronto Star when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline practically screamed, "Local man leaves seniors stranded at Pearson during holiday rush." My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was, in black and white, an old photo from my company's website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare in equal measure. Roger and Beverly McPherson, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Toronto Pearson International Airport for over 3 hours Sunday, when family member Dennis McIntyre failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 60s, waited in blustery winter conditions as a winter storm warning was issued for the greater Toronto area. Winter storm warning. It had been +11 and sunny, with nary a cloud in the sky. We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that. Roger McPherson, a retired banking executive, was quoted saying, "We called repeatedly, but Mr. McIntyre never answered his phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in what felt like dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just inconsiderate, it's dangerous." The article continued with quotes about my supposed pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Roger had painted himself and Beverly as helpless victims. They painted Beverly and Roger as helpless victims, abandoned by a cruel old man who'd snapped for no reason. Not a single word about being told I wasn't welcome for Christmas. No mention of Chloe's endless demands, or the years they bled me dry. Just me, Dennis McIntyre, the villain who left poor elderly tourists out in a blizzard that existed only in Roger's twisted imagination. I set down my coffee mug, my hand trembling slightly, and read the article again slowly, then a third time. The byline said, "Patricia Morrison, Lifestyle Editor." The name didn't ring a bell, but the tactic did. Roger had definitely called in some of his Bay Street favors, used those banking connections to plant this story exactly where it would do the most damage to my good name. Clever. Very clever. For the first time since this whole sorry saga began, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. This wasn't just a bunch of entitled folks throwing a fit because they didn't get their way. No, this was strategic calculating. They understood that in a place like our corner of Ontario, reputation is everything. One well-placed story in the local rag could flatten decades of honest toil. This wasn't a skirmish, eh? This was total war. I folded the Star, carefully setting it aside, my mind already slipping into that methodical planning mode, the one that had built my contracting business from a single toolbox and a prayer. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about Christmas dinner, or even those darn mortgage payments. This was about winning. Pure and simple. I pulled out my old laptop, its fan humming to life, and started typing names into search engines. Roger McPherson, Beverly, McPherson, Chloe. Even Liam, their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd so foolishly splashed all over the internet for years. If they wanted to play chess, I was about to show them what a real strategist looked like, eh? I glanced at the wall calendar above my sink. December 18th. 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to cook up something they'd never ever forget. I spent the next 3 days in a different headspace entirely. Not the world where I was Dennis McIntyre, the broken-down old fella who let his family walk all over him. This was the world of Dennis McIntyre, businessman, strategic thinker. A man who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let a bunch of entitled parasites stomp all over 40 years of sweat and grit. My laptop became my command central. Social media profiles filled my browser tabs like a hand of cards in a high-stakes poker game. Roger McPherson, retired Bay Street bigwig member of the Royal Canadian Yacht Club on the board of some fancy downtown business association. A man who'd spent his entire career in positions of immense trust and influence. A man with an awful lot to lose, Beverly's Instagram painted a picture-perfect life of refined living, charity luncheons, exclusive wine tastings, vacation snaps from some high-end resort up in cottage country, all tagged with some nonsense like #BlessedLife. Every single post meticulously curated to project success and sophistication. Comments from her friends gushing about her elegant taste and inspiring lifestyle. All of it, every last bit, built on other people's money, including mine. Chloe's Facebook timeline, though. That told the real story. Posts gushing about our beautiful home, complete with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for. Check-ins at pricey downtown restaurants during the very months I was covering their utility bills. And a status update from just last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family, can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success, The sheer narcissism of it was breathtaking. But it was Liam's LinkedIn profile that gave me the final critical piece of the puzzle. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor at the Toronto Star. The very same Patricia Morrison who'd penned that hatchet job about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, taking it all in the evidence spread out across my screen. These folks had made 3 sorry crucial mistakes, First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public with their attack, which meant I could go public with my response. And third, they'd foolishly documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect, undeniable catalog of their own hypocrisy. I scrolled deeper into Patricia Morrison's profile. 43, a journalism degree from a decent university out east. 15 years grinding it out at various local papers. No background in banking or finance, which meant Liam had reached out cold, probably through some buddy from his business network. A quick 5-minute search through the local directories confirmed my hunch. 3 mutual connections between Liam and Patricia's editor. That story hadn't just appeared, It had been planted neat as you please, carefully and deliberately. Rookie move, I fired up a new document and started typing. Not some angry rant back at their smear job, no sir. Something much, much better. A timeline. 5 years of what they'd called support. I had it all documented: bank statements, receipts, canceled checks. The down payment for their fancy house, $47,000 from my home equity loan. Then there was that kitchen reno, when Chloe decided granite countertops were absolutely essential for her gourmet lifestyle. 18,000 smackers from my credit card. 60 monthly mortgage payments, $2,800 each. That's $168,000 and still counting. $250,000 all told. More than I'd spent on myself in the last decade. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Chloe trying a new angle, fishing for something. I ignored it and just kept at it. By supper time, I had everything organized in a manila folder, thick enough to choke a moose, I tell ya. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded right from their social media, pictures of them showing off the very purchases I'd funded, and a printed copy of that newspaper article, all covered in my own handwritten notes in the margins documenting every single lie and distortion. I glanced up at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in red, and not because it was Christmas, eh? It was the perfect day for a little taste of justice. According to Chloe's Facebook events, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12. Family, friends, neighbors, their whole social circle. The kind of folks who read the Toronto Star and formed their opinions based on what they saw there. The kind of folks who deserved to know the real truth. I closed my laptop and headed to the kitchen where I'd left my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document job sites for my contracting business. Time to put it to work, documenting something else entirely, eh? Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, Liam and his family were going to learn what happens when you declare war on a Canuck who actually knows how to fight. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of Ontario winter day that makes you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at either. But I had other plans, eh? I laid out my evidence like a lawyer prepping for a big trial. Bank statements organized by year, each monthly payment highlighted in bright yellow. Receipts arranged chronologically showing the clear pattern of my support for their grand lifestyle. Photos printed from their social media, Chloe's new jewelry, their fancy vacation snaps, all those expensive Christmas decorations currently adorning the house. I'd help them keep all of it, eh? I copied the whole bundle 12 times, one for each dinner guest. That newspaper article went right on top of each stack, my red pen notes clearly visible in the margins. Lie. I'd scrawled next to Roger's quotes about dangerous weather. False. Beside the claim about my erratic behavior, missing context, highlighted everywhere they'd conveniently failed to mention 5 years of continuous financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Maria's funeral. Pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today I was saying goodbye to the man who'd been a doormat for his own family. Tonight, I'd be someone who commanded a bit of respect, by gum. At 6:30 in the evening, I loaded my briefcase with those thick evidence packets and drove over to their swanky cul-de-sac. Their house glowed with a warm, inviting light, cars spilling out of the driveway and lining the street. Through the front windows, I could make out figures bustling around the dining room. Chloe playing the perfect hostess in the very home my money had helped them buy, eh? I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be settled in for dinner. Early enough that they'd still be elbow-deep in the main course, eh? No easy escape for anyone. The front door naturally wasn't locked. Of course, it wasn't. Chloe loved to show off how wonderfully safe their little slice of suburban heaven was, how they didn't need to worry about security, not like folks in those ahem other parts of town. I let myself in as quiet as a church mouse, the warm air hitting my face like a welcome mat, along with the cacophony of laughter and conversation spilling from the dining room. Just as I stepped inside, I heard Beverly's voice clear as a bell chiming. "But darling, that's simply not how we do things in our family," followed by a ripple of polite laughter. Our family, after everything they'd done to exclude me from it. The gall. I walked right into the dining room, my old leather briefcase swinging easily in my hand. 12 faces, all mid-chew or mid-sip, snapped toward me, their expressions a magnificent blend of surprise, confusion, and outright horror. Chloe froze a wine glass halfway to her perfectly painted lips, looking like a statue from a fancy art gallery. Liam's face, my boy's face, went pale as the driven snow outside. Roger and Beverly, meanwhile, looked like they'd just seen a ghost, and not the friendly Casper kind, either. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a prairie sunrise. I set my briefcase down on their gleaming marble sideboard, the one I'd helped Liam haul home last spring. "I trust you don't mind me crashing your little Christmas shindig, eh?" Chloe found her voice first, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the sudden quiet. "Dennis, this is completely out of line. You need to leave. Immediately." Actually, I said, unlatching my briefcase with a deliberate snap, then pulling out the first stack of papers, crisp and heavy in my hand. "I think your esteemed guests deserve to know who really paid for this lavish dinner, this house and this lifestyle you've all been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Beverly's high society charity friends, leaned forward, her eyes wide with a very uncharitable curiosity. "What on earth is he talking about, Chloe?" she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. He's having some kind of episode," Chloe stammered quickly, waving a dismissive hand at me. "Liam, call someone." But I was already moving, circling the polished mahogany table, placing a thick packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said, my voice still conversational as if I were discussing the weather. 5 years of consistent financial support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone. And that's not counting the down payment, the renovations, all that swanky furniture or the fancy appliances. Everything you see around you, folks. I gestured vaguely at the room, at the very walls and decor that had cost me a king's ransom. The room went stone silent, save for the nervous rustling of papers as a dozen sets of eyes began poring over the evidence. I watched their faces one by one as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable stone-cold proof of my generosity and their profound deception. "This is—" A man started, his voice trailing off, his gaze fixed on a bank statement, his face a picture of stunned disbelief. "Outrageous," finished the woman across from him, her voice tight with indignation. "Chloe." Someone else demanded, their voice laced with sudden suspicion. "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" Chloe's perfect composure, the one she usually wore like a designer coat, was cracking fissures appearing all over it. It's more complicated than it looks, honestly, Dennis." Dennis volunteered to help us. We never asked. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out the printed copy of the Toronto Star article. "Let's talk about what you did ask for, and what you decided to tell the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, like someone had just opened a freezer door. I laid the newspaper copies flat on the table, watching as the dinner guests recognized my photo from that unflattering story that had run just 3 days earlier. "Now," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden heavy silence, "let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Roger's face, which had been pale with shock, now went ashen as if all the blood had drained right out of him. Beverly sat ramrod straight in her chair, her wine glass forgotten in her hand, her eyes fixed on me. "Roger here." I continued tapping the newspaper with my finger, used his Bay Street banking connections to plant this story. "Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing, blustery conditions. A gray-haired man in an expensive cashmere sweater, one of Roger's old cronies, I guessed, looked up from the article, his brow furrowed. "Roger, what is this about?" he asked, his tone demanding. The weather was +11, and sunny, actually, I said before Roger could even open his mouth. And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Chloe's parents coming to the Christmas dinner I'd been banned from attending because apparently I wasn't good enough for their company. Beverly finally found her voice, a thin, reedy sound. "That's not... We never said..." "You never said what, Beverly?" I pulled out my phone where I'd screenshotted several of Chloe's most choice social media posts. That I was too low class for your parents. That my humble cooking and working class conversations would embarrass you in front of your educated friends. The woman I'd identified as one of Beverly's charity friends shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flicking between Beverly and the screen in my hand. "Surely you didn't. He's twisting everything," Cody blustered, but the conviction had completely drained from his voice, leaving it thin and reedy. "This man has serious mental health issues. The stress of aging, financial problems. Financial problems?" I almost laughed right in his face. "Mr. Tremblay," I corrected my voice, cutting through his feeble excuse. "I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have, eh?" I turned my gaze, sweeping slowly across the entire table. "These people," I continued, my voice steady, "have taken over $200,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my own son against me, banned me, from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the Toronto Star." Liam spoke for the first time, his voice barely a whisper, eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper." "Your wife knew," I said quietly, holding his gaze. "And her parents orchestrated it start to finish. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur." The social dynamic in the room was shifting like fresh snow underfoot, settling into new, uncomfortable truths. I could see it in the guests' faces, the gradual realization that everything they'd been told about tonight's generous hosts was built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated lies. "This is unconscionable," murmured an elderly woman in pearls, her eyes glued to the bank statements in her hand. "Cody, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this man's generosity, then attack him publicly when he stopped enabling it?" Cody's carefully maintained facade was crumbling around him, leaving him exposed. "You don't understand the full situation," he stammered, looking suddenly much older. "I understand perfectly." The woman interrupted, her voice firm. "This man has been supporting your family financially while you treated him like hired help, and when he finally said no, you tried to ruin his reputation. It's disgusting." Catherine's voice came out strangled, a desperate last gasp. "He abandoned us at the airport after you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my background and my education level." The silence that followed was so deep, it hummed. 12 people all staring at Cody and Catherine with expressions ranging from outright disgust to profound embarrassment for having ever associated with them. Chloe made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative, her voice a thin, shaky plea. "Everyone, please. This is a family matter that's gotten out of hand." "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you used the Toronto Star to attack my character, when you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride." Looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize, but who now knew exactly who I was. "I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about Dennis McIntyre in the paper again," I said, my voice resonating with quiet conviction. "Because you will read about me again, but next time it'll be the real story." I closed my briefcase with a decisive snap and straightened my tie, though it hadn't been askew. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner, folks," I said, turning towards the dining room archway. "It's the last one I'll be paying for." As I walked toward the door, I could hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social facade falling apart with a series of muffled thuds. It was, I gotta say, the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail, with the weight of legal consequences behind every single word. I signed for it at my front door, noting how the spring air already smelled of new growth and possibility, a stark contrast to the biting winter desperation that had marked those dark December days. Notice of default, the envelope read, "Final demand for payment." Inside 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with Liam and Chloe like a tsunami of reality. $8,400 in arrears with just 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the very house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside, placing it gently on my kitchen counter, and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you'd read news about a distant snowstorm. Interesting, maybe even a little dramatic, but definitely not my problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks, the calls from Liam and Chloe increasing in frequency, a cacophony of increasingly desperate calls. Chloe's number, of course, was blocked after that first hysterical voicemail. As for Roger and Beverly, their social standing in our little corner of Ontario had evaporated faster than a summer mist after their Christmas dinner humiliation. Even Liam, whose calls I'd been letting ring out of a mixture of raw anger and a morbid curiosity to see how long it would take him to swallow his pride, finally showed up. The answer apparently was 97 days. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening, no longer the confident young man who'd seen fit to exclude me from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a full decade in 3 short months. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His once expensive suit was wrinkled, and the faint smell of desperation clung to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he mumbled when I finally opened the door. "We need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he looked around my house as if he were seeing it for the very first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage payment-free check, the fresh paint on walls that hadn't seen a brush in 8 years, because every spare dollar had gone to subsidizing his grand lifestyle. All the repairs I'd finally been able to afford, now that I wasn't bankrolling someone else's Canadian dream. "Nice place," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it." "Appreciate it," I replied, settling into my brand new recliner. "Coffee or a double-double?" He shook his head, perching awkwardly on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything. Christmas dinner, that newspaper article, the way Chloe, the way we treated you." "Go on," I prompted, my voice flat. I didn't know about Roger planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out, he ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Jesus, Dad. The things they said about you behind your back. The way they talked about our family, about Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Maria, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your mother?" He squirmed, unable to meet my gaze. "That she knew her place better than you knew yours, that she understood boundaries. They couldn't look me in the eye. I should have defended you," he finally choked out. "I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the crushing weight of 5 years of mistakes filling the space between us. Outside, I could hear Old Man Henderson next door mowing his lawn. The normal sounds of a normal Thursday evening in a normal Ontario neighborhood where sons didn't exclude their fathers from Christmas dinner. "The house is in foreclosure, Dad." Liam said finally, the words barely audible. "I know. We can't make the payments without—" He stopped, seeming to finally realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks, Dad," he mumbled. I leaned forward, making sure he was looking right at me. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 5 years? He nodded miserably, eyes fixed on his hands. Chloe calculated it after Christmas. The mortgage payments, the down payment, everything else. Over $200,000. $237,468. I corrected, my voice precise. "I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. I added it all up." His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been building a real relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life." "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." He looked up at me with something that might have been a flicker of hope. "But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's a way to—" "Are you asking me to resume the mortgage payments?" The hope died in his eyes, snuffed out like a flickering candle. We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Chloe's respect for me, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do." "You'll figure it out," I said, not unkindly. "The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone, while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them." He crumpled, then sinking onto the edge of my couch, sobbing quietly, like a man utterly drained of options. "I messed up, didn't I, Dad? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever." I watched him, a long, heavy silence hanging in the air. This young man, my son, the one I'd raised and loved and sacrificed every last dime for. He'd let Chloe's folks convince him his own father wasn't fit for their fancy company. "Liam," I said, finally, my voice softer than I'd intended, but firm all the same. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a raw, desperate gesture. "Is there any chance, Dad? Any way you could ever forgive me?" "I forgave you months ago," I told him, and I meant it truly. That weight had lifted on Christmas Eve. But forgiveness. "Liam, doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. It doesn't mean we pretend this never happened, or that I'm suddenly going to start bankrolling a lifestyle that came with the unspoken condition I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Not a chance." "Then what does it mean?" he asked, looking up, his face streaked with tears. I pushed myself up from my new recliner and walked over to the mantel where Maria's photo sat still beaming beside a new snapshot. Me, Aunt Lorraine, and her grandkids, all of us laughing around a table at Easter dinner. That had been my first holiday, truly my first, in years, spent with people who actually wanted me there, plain and simple. It means I continued turning back to him, that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect, not expecting me to earn it every single day. It means making choices based on what's right. Liam, not just what's convenient. I held his gaze. And it means that the next time someone, Chloe, her parents, anyone tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. You'll stand up for me, eh? He nodded slowly, the understanding dawning in his eyes, perhaps for the very first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted, like a freely flowing tap. The house, he asked quietly, almost a plea. The house isn't my problem anymore, Liam, I said, sitting back down, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man now. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the place and buy something you can actually afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. He stood up slowly, and I noticed his shoulders, which had been slumped since he walked in, straightened a little. You're right about all of it, Dad. I know. He walked to the door, his hand on the knob, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth. Seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, yeah, but I was proud, too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, the quiet descended again, a different kind of quiet now. I poured myself a generous measure of the good Canadian rye and stepped out onto my back porch. Spring was slowly making its way across Ontario, the trees starting to bud, the air warming with the promise of new beginnings. In 4 months, I'd be 63. Maria had been gone for 8 years. I'd wasted 5 of those years being a doormat for people who couldn't care less about sacrifice. I wasn't planning on wasting any more. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Aunt Lorraine. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled, a genuine wide smile that stretched my cheeks. I typed back, wouldn't miss it for the world. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there, simple as that. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done at buying tickets to shows where I wasn't even welcome on stage. The rye tasted like freedom, pure and unadulterated, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it.